watching the Monitor Channel.
Today, more than 4 months after the end of the Gulf War, the fumes and toxic smoke from Kuwait's 400 burning oil wells continue to darken skies over the entire region. Millions of gallons of crude oil are still drifting in the Persian Gulf along the coast of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Emirates. And on the ground, gushes of raw crude have formed massive rivers of oil and petro lakes, creating yet another threat for wildlife. For an update on the lingering environmental impacts of the Gulf War, we're joined now by two men who both returned just recently from fact-finding missions to the Gulf. Farouk El-Baz is an internationally recognized specialist in remote sensing at Boston University, and Richard Golub is an oil pollution control expert who heads World Information Systems. Thank you both for joining us today. Professor El-Baz, let me begin by asking you, we've heard about all of the horrible pollution that is still continuing in the Gulf. What's been done in cleanup?
There is really very little to be done as far as the cleanup of the areas around the oil well fires. The cleanup that has been done right now is with the oil spill itself. And what I had seen near Jubail, the place where there is the water desalination plant, they have pumped out oil of the water, out of the water, to equal 200,000 barrels already. The interesting thing is that they really don't know what to do with this oil. They have dug huge basins, very much like Olympic swimming pools, and they cover them with little plastic sheets, and they take that oil and dump it in these basins, and the oil remains there. They cannot sell it to Aramco, the oil company. They cannot do anything with it because all of the aromatics, all of the good things in that oil have already evaporated, and you have just a black, tarry gook. So that is really almost useless.
Mr. Golub, from your standpoint, do you think that the countries in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, are making good headway in efforts to control the pollution?
I think both countries have been somewhat slow in responding to the oil spill, and Kuwait certainly has been a little slow in responding to the oil fires. But my feeling is that the environmental problems in the Gulf, it's not a local problem, it's not a regional problem, simply it's an international problem. And the coalition members that fought together to win the military war in the Gulf should band together to fight a war to save the Gulf environment. Because I think only with a united coalition of countries can the countries in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, have the necessary manpower, equipment, and funding to deal with the oil spill and the oil fires.
What are the coalition partners, countries like the United States and its allies, doing to assist in the cleanup efforts?
First, as far as the oil well fires are concerned, most of the companies that are in Kuwait right now fighting the fire are American, but this has nothing to do with the government. They have made their deals directly with the government of Kuwait. But the U.S. government has sent several teams from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, NSF, the National Science Foundation. So there have been teams of experts going there to investigate one thing or another. Investigating. And that is not really enough, because what we really need is a continuous monitoring of change. And that is done in part, but not on the scale that is required.
With monitoring of change, are there other things going on that we don't hear about? We've heard about the fires at the oil wells, and we've heard about the spills, but are there other environmental impacts from the Gulf War? There were hundreds of thousands of soldiers fighting there that haven't really caught the attention of the news?
There certainly is tremendous impact on the desert ecosystem. Right now there's a layer of soot that's depositing on the desert. It could have potentially adverse impact on the dormant seeds in the upper layer of the desert crust. Also could be destroying the microbial activity in the desert. In addition, with the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and tanks and other Army vehicles in the desert, there have been tracks and trenches built, and those too are disrupting the desert. And during the Old West, those tracks from the covered wagons still remain intact in some of the western towns in the United States. So it will take decades and perhaps 100 years before the desert recovers.
Of course, a lot of that soot that you're talking about is coming from the oil well fires, which are still blazing at something like 400 wells. I think Red Adair, the dean of oil well firefighters from the United States, has said it's going to take something like 4 years or more to put out all those fires?
Yes, he said that because he knows that there are some of the wells that are so large and it is so difficult to get to them that they're putting them off is going to take much longer than people have anticipated. But let's say it takes a couple of years. So the effect from the oil well fires is going to be with us for 2 years. Maybe the effect of the oil spill are going to be with us for decades. But as Dr. Golub said, that the effect on the desert surface itself might be here for centuries because of the fact that turning up the surface of the desert like that and affecting the natural shields of the desert will expose the soil to wind erosion, and the result will be many dust storms and also the creation of new sand dunes.
You've been talking about the long-term effects. What are the short-term effects? We just saw men working in the oil fields there trying to put out the flames, and we've heard a lot about the toxic smoke that comes from oil fires. What are the immediate health effects on people living in the Gulf region?
Well, right now, the EPA did a preliminary assessment of the health effects, and they said, surprisingly, that there would be no long-term serious health consequences. And my feeling is that it was much too premature for the EPA to make any type of prognostication like that. And in fact, my greatest fear is that the smoke from the burning wells will become the Agent Orange of the Gulf War, and that the health consequences may not become apparent for years after the last well is brought under control.
So one last question for us here. What should the international community, apart from permanent monitoring, what should countries like the United States and its allies be doing to cope with the pollution in the Gulf?
There are a whole bunch of things to be done right away. For instance, the disruption to the desert surface can be remedied by refilling all of the trenches and the holes in the ground that were made as far as the oil is concerned in the Gulf, helping the effort to skim it off the surface. And as far as the oil fires are concerned, more effort should be done to put off the oil well fires. But in addition to all of that, we really need a permanent staff of scientists to monitor the situation all along to make certain that we would have enough of a long-term warning so that we can tell people if there are any health hazards.
Farouk El-Baz and Richard Golub, thank you both for being with us today. Coming up next, Mount Pinatubo and the Pacific's Ring of Fire.